Hey, welcome to the CoLab podcast. My name is Ryan Macpherson, CEO and co-founder at Co-Assemble. Introducing the genius behind the product, Jude Novak, CPO and co-founder as well.
And we're here to talk all things online training.
Awesome. Enjoy.
So Ryan, in this session, we're going to talk about the learner-first model. This is something you've been speaking about for a couple of years now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And mentioned a couple of times on the podcast. So
and you have too, yep.
Get through in detail
so
today.
I think it's about time that you've explained it to everybody. What does it actually mean? What is the learner-first model as far as you're concerned?
Well, I guess I want to take this back to, a bit of a story, right? And so, if you come into online training or really anything, website design, there's a lot of chat about user experience, right? There's a lot of chat about and design thinking about, how do we create an experience for the user? At the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to use the technology, or they're the ones that are going to buy my product. It really is just kind of taking that approach and flipping it to an online training mechanism and saying, okay, at the end of the day, if we're going to create something that's going to impart education or knowledge for someone, there's a number of factors that are really important in that. And it doesn't start with what content you've got. It doesn't start with what technology you've got. It actually starts with, okay, what do we know about that person, right? So the learner first approach actually puts the learner first, the course second, if that makes sense. So what we're saying is, we want this person to know this. We know this about this person. We know that they're going to enjoy this type of, experience. We want to deliver it at this time to make sure that it's relevant for them. We want to make sure it's contextually relevant to their job. We're really thinking and designing whatever experience we're designing, whether it's a short course, long course, design basically around, safety training, doesn't really matter. We don't want, for example, someone who is in the office in finance going through the safety course for the builder, right? There's a completely different disconnect there. And a lot of the times companies think about online training as a one shoe fits all, right? And the learner first approach actually says, nope, that's terrible. That's not a good idea. We actually want to think about that learner, that person that's going to go through this content first. We want to think about, who are they? What is their demographic? Where are they coming from? Where are they working? What's a part of their everyday? How is this going to impact that, right? And then we can design great experiences once we understand that first.
Okay. So in a nutshell, really what you're saying is...
I thought that was a nutshell.
Okay. I was just going to try and... So basically what you're saying is that it needs to have the right context.
Yep.
For the right person.
The right timing, the right context, the right type of information. So I'll give you an example, right? So here we are, we've got a sales guy, right? Or a lady basically working in sales, right? And we've got a sales team member, let's say.
So you're cracking the nut open now as we speak, right?
Yeah, I'm about to get deep, right? Using the analogies, right? So we've got a salesperson all day. They're on the phone to new leads. They're sending emails to new customers, potential customers. They're trying to close deals. They're trying to sell the product. They're trying to sell the service, whatever that is, right? The types of training that they like is often competitive. Their nature is very competitive. They love to compete, right? So gamification in the process of thinking about training for them is important. They're generally very, very reactive to what's in front of them, right? So when it's delivered is important, right? They want to be motivated and they want to know the latest and greatest, not necessarily about anything, but about what is going to get them more sales, right? So if we're going to design training for a sales individual, all of those capacities, all those components really come into it. So let's talk about contextually relevance, right? Contextual relevance is really thinking about learning and saying, okay, is this training that I'm about to design relevant for a salesperson and a product engineer at the same time? And a lot of the time, no. So the way that we think about it often is to just say, okay, here's the training. It's for everyone, right? And out it goes. And the product engineer picks it up and says, well, actually, I don't sell anything. It would have been really good to understand where the product's going from an engineering perspective, or really add that contextual layer. The salesperson goes, oh, why is this all about product and not about how we sell the product, for example, or what the customers are looking for? So really thinking about contextualization. I know that Co-Assemble, we use groups, for example, to really think about dividing that up, but it actually goes deeper than that. It's about when I'm designing and thinking about course content, I'm thinking about contextually relevant information for the type of role or the person that's actually going to go through this course.
And would you say that the context in which somebody consumes this course or this information makes a difference.
100%. And we often talk about mobile delivery versus non-mobile delivery, right? So if you're talking to a builder on site, for example, you want to put training in their arms, they're often, they're on site, they're busy, might be on a mobile phone. The induction to the work site, for example, might be on the mobile phone because they're out and about, right? And if you're talking about someone that works in an office all day, potentially they're going to have a large desktop to view that training on. So how you're actually thinking about that information, and also it comes down to challenges and thinking about, how am I going to question this person? Does this person know anything about this topic yet? Do I understand that they don't know anything about this topic, or are they already an advanced level in this area, right? So if you think about someone who is a manager of people who has done the role for 15 years, getting the exact same training as the person that just come on the day one, it doesn't make sense that person would get the exact same course, because one is going to be completely turned off and disengaged because they feel like this is information that maybe I already knew. And the first person might be truly engaged, but maybe too much. It's scary, right? How much information is being displayed. So the learner first approach really looks at going, okay, let's think about pare back. And sometimes it does require a little bit of extra thought and process and thinking to design learner first and not content first. And what I mean by that is content first is I've got X piece of content. I just want to design it for everyone. Learner first is I've got a learner. What's the best content? What's the best experience that aligns to them?
Yeah. So I guess just listening to you now, I'm wondering if some of our listeners will probably be going, okay, it just sounds like I have to create more stuff. Mm-hmm. So if that is the case, tell me, why is it so important? Like, why is this important?
Well, I think, online training really only delivers a big bang to the business when it changes someone's trajectory, right? So if you're thinking about using online training in the business, if you're just thinking about disseminating information and hoping that everyone sees it, online training will deliver that for you, but it's probably not going to deliver the best, bang for the business, right? So let's say, for example, in Co-Assemble, we've got a product team, we've got an engineering team, we've got a marketing team, we've got a CS team, we've got a sales team, and there should be training that just goes across all company-wide, right? But if I was to really say to you, Jude, how are we going to motivate your team through online training? I'm sure the context that you would design content would be very different to how, let's say, Tanner, for example, one of our genius sales guys, would basically design the context for his team. Yeah. So I think what this dispels, and I get this question a lot, it means that I'm going to have to do more work. I think if you've been listening to our podcast, the tools that we have, the rapid content we talked about the other day, the simplicity of the LMS that's changing, it's actually empowering more people in the business to design content that's relevant rather than necessarily it coming from one gold standard place. And so I'd argue that it's not more work, it's actually empowering others to use the tools to basically impart the information that's probably best fit for their audience.
Yeah. So how would you, what would your approach be to making sure that you're following kind of learner first model?
Yeah,
how do I start?
Well, it's amazing. We've got an ebook on the website, so you can actually download that. It's actually broken down into 7 different sections. But the first is actually research, right? And often in online content creation and in online training, the first thing that's not done is just researching who the audience is, right? So, for example, you're onboarding your new staff and you've got no idea who they are, then you're probably going to create an onboarding experience that's pretty vanilla, right? But let's say, for example, you're like, well, we're onboarding new millennial style, people to our business. That is something that gives you context now. So I know something about my audience, right? So just doing a little bit of research before you actually start content creating is really important, right? So thinking about what resources I already have inside that I could utilize, right? Evaluating when might be the best time for this person to access it. And let me break that down. So online training could be delivered week by week, right? It's pretty easy to do. I can send out a course week by week to really busy teams because, to be honest, they're not going to sit there for an hour at one time, right? Or I could do it every 6 months, or I could do it every day. There's a lot of different ways that we can think about matching the dissemination or delivery method to the type of role that we've got, right? So I talked about builders before. They're often not going to do online training on site. They're building houses, they're building buildings, but in the downtime, when they might do it, but they're probably not going to be on a laptop. They might be on a mobile device. So we've really got to think about that and make sure that the method actually suits the delivery.
So getting back to kind of like how you would implement it, how would you start measuring the difference between, like, because someone's going to ask, all right, I'm going to go all the effort of creating different variations. Like, how do you measure that?
One of the things that we've seen quite, successfully used by companies at Co-Assemble, and I've definitely consulted with some companies on this, which is what we call split testing. Now, it's a pretty common term in, let's say, for example, marketing, or in product, for example, where we might have two websites. They have very different content and design, and we're seeing which one performs better, right? Often what you can do with rapid content creation tools, you can actually create one course that's very advanced and one course that maybe is a little bit as an intro, and you can invite both parties at the start. It's a testing process. Send out two links to different people, see which one gets more engagement. Engagement might be measured by time in the course. Engagement might be measured by completion. Engagement might be that they basically come out and change their role the next day and you saw an input of more sales or whatever that it might be. So split testing is one of the methods, and if you've got a really easy sharing mechanism matched with a content creation tool that's rather quick, you can do that. The other is what we call, you mentioned it in another podcast, discovery learning, right? So I give a short burst of information that I know covers the base level, and then I've created a couple of other courses that are buy-ins. So I only really have to do those if I'm interested, right? So the first course might be, I've designed 4 courses for everyone, right? But I only enroll everyone in the base course to start, right? And that just gets everyone across the topic. But there's a button that says, hey, I would love to learn more on this topic. I'm actually really interested and I'd like to go deeper. Oh, well, actually, we've got another couple of courses for you ready to go. But it becomes a little bit more opt-in rather than necessarily straight disseminated. And that's another part of the learner-first model, is actually saying, are all courses relevant for everyone? Or potentially, do we have a list of courses and you, Jude, will pick 3 to 4 that really matter to you, and then someone else might pick 5 that matter to them? Does that make sense?
Would you say there's a trend towards this kind of model amongst online training, like throughout?
I think it's something often forgotten, to be honest. So I think a lot of people start with content in mind. So they're like, okay, I have this PowerPoint just works for any audience. And I think the thing that we're challenging with the learner first approach is saying, cool, it doesn't have to be more work, but if you do think about who that audience is, you could adapt just 1 or 2 tiles, 1 or 2 experiences, couple questions, and it might be the difference. And I'll give an example. You've got a customer success agent who talks to customers all day. They're in a live chat experience, let's say, for example, and you've got a quiz, and that quiz is, how do you fix X problem, and you've got just a generic quiz, just says, here are the answers. Or you can make that quiz just slightly different and say, okay, if the customer comes with this X problem and they want to discuss this, what is the question? And if you tailor that to them a bit more specific, they actually think this quiz is for them. And that can be a big turn on almost for them to basically get more involved in that learning, rather than this quiz was for everyone in the business. And so it doesn't really impact my day.
Yeah, Ryan, so is there anything else you wanted to discuss about the learner first model that we haven't already talked about?
Yeah, and I think it comes down to feedback. So the best way to use the learner first approach is essentially to test and iterate, right? You want to have learning that's an ongoing organism that changes, right? So you don't want to just go, oh, there's that course, it's now done, it's dead, I'm never going to change it again. The way that you can change and improve the learner first approach is getting feedback from the learner, right? So actually understanding what that experience was like for them, sitting in their shoes and going, I thought that I was presenting this, right? But they actually didn't see that at all. And I wasn't able to get across what I was assuming I was going to get across. So really listening to the learner. And I guess when we think about it, Jude, we talk about listening to the customer, getting feedback from our customers.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I was going to say. It sounds like what you're talking about is someone actually building a product and iterating on it.
Very much so.
So you're basically comparing it, like you're building a course and iterating on it,
Correct.
Getting feedback.
And there's this concept, I think, in the market, and also probably in online training, that the final product of an online course has to be perfect, right? And we're done with it. It's like, I spent 6 weeks on this thing. Everything that person needs to know is perfectly designed in there. And I think that's probably an over assumption when you think about the learner first model, right? What you could do is put out the first chunk the first little piece of information that entices them into the process of learning about this, and then ask them a quick quiz. Hey, what's next on the agenda? What would you like to cover, right? And that then leads to your secondary course. And that secondary course has now been tailored back to the learner, right? So we can actually start to go, instead of creating 6 courses in advance and saying, hey, I know exactly how the learners are going to want to step through this topic. What we can do is we can start with the first part and go, oh, they're actually really interested in customer conversations, or they're really interested in bug issues, or whatever that might be. We can now take that next piece and we can design it on the flow with rapid content creation tools like ours. You can basically take that and go, okay, I'm going to make the next one next week, and it's going to be very tailored to what they really want to learn about. And that makes the learner actually a part of this journey. They're actually designing the training with you, rather than you just making an assumption as a content creator or the knowledge holder that I know everything there is that this person needs to know. We're actually taking that learner on the journey and say, hey, you can be a part of this as well.
Cool. Well, thanks for providing this insight into the learner first model. I know you've talked about it a few times before.
I think a lot of people are excited about it. It's not hard to get started. I think the first thing you got to think about is, how can I get them enticed into what I want them to learn? And then after that, how can I keep it living and breathing and changing so that it's relevant for them long term?
Cool.
So guys, we've talked about the learner first approach today. A pretty cool concept. I think a lot of businesses out there trying this approach. More to find out on our website. If you're really interested, I'm always available via live chat, even if you're on our website. So hit me up, but make sure you subscribe to the CoLab podcast. We're having a lot of fun doing these podcasts, and hopefully they've been insightful for you. I think it's on Apple. I think it's on Spotify. Pretty cool that we're on Spotify, mate. But make sure you subscribe, get into it, and enjoy the chats.
Cool. Thanks.